probably tell, my voice isn't very strong today. I feel okay. I had a little cold, but that's long gone, but see if we get through this. So my three siblings and I have a custom of meeting every Tuesday for lunch. And a couple of weeks ago, my sister sprang a surprise on my brother Reed. She said, I brought to you the genealogy box. So you might call this a Nagel family archive. My dad was really into genealogy, so he was tracing back our family for many generations. And he has all these records and papers and, just documents that he found interesting. And they're in this big box, this container, and nobody wants it. But my mother died, and so it's been traveling around. Nobody wants to throw it out either. I don't want it. I say I can't. But I do kind of like genealogy, actually. It's a historian in me. I like to know where I'm from. And also, I think part of the fun is to find out, maybe we have some interesting people back there. Maybe there's some famous people back there. I bet I'm related to some. Maybe I'm related to a royal family. That's the kind of things you think of. What would it be like, my great uncle or something was the Duke of whatever. But I was thinking about this in terms of, I think we do have this desire, what would it be like to be a king? I think the little children's books oftentimes they're centered around princesses or princes. And I think that idea of what would it be like to wear that crown and to be that person, just hold on to that. I mean, will I be a good king? What would it be like? I bring up those kind of daydreams of royalty because in today's parable, Jesus tells us, the kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king. So in the parable, the king is Jesus. And the point of the parable is the necessity of forgiving others as he has forgiven us. So we're all the king's debtors, right? We're all number one, the first debtor. And how does Christ the King treat us? Well, he starts with justice. The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who decided to settle accounts with his servants. So we're going to get what we deserve. And that doesn't make me feel good. Uh-oh. Do I really want that? The debtor said, please, I beg you for mercy and more time. And the king went from justice to mercy. And he forgave everything. Every time this comes up, I always talk to my parish about this translation because it bugs me. So let's stop to look at the translation. It's misleading. Our version says the first debtor owes a huge amount. I don't think this is strong enough. This is a gross understatement. So the Greek says a myriad of talents. So that means 10,000 talents. And a talent at this time was 6,000 denarii. And one denarius was a day's wages. So what you're looking at here is, so 1 talent's a half time of a person's wages. This is like 5,000 lifetimes of your wages. So it was impossible. There was no way he could do it. When he's begging for more time, the master must have laughed. I could give you forever, and you couldn't do it. But the debt owed to the first servant by the second servant is translated in the Greek. It's translated in our version a much smaller amount. But actually, the Greek is 100 denarii. Now, so that's about 3.5 months' wages. That's big, but it's doable. So we're talking about 2 different kinds of debts. It's not just like big and small. It's human and impossible for human. So what is it to be a king? Jesus is saying to be a king is to be able and willing to forgive the unforgivable debt. So in the confessional, people come and say, I have trouble forgiving people. And one of the ways you could do that, and I say this, is to start to pray for the person who's hurt you. Become the intercessor for that person. It doesn't mean that justice is still there, but because that reminds you of the relationship between debtor 1 and debtor 2. They're both servants of the king. And so we're all sons and daughters of God. Okay, but another way, even more fundamental level, the answer to the question of how to forgive is to call to mind not the relationship between the sinner and the sinned against, debtor 1 and 2, but because that's a fractured relationship. That's wounded. But to instead think about the relationship between me, debtor number 1, and God. That's who I really am. My deepest relationship is not as debtor 2, but as debtor 1. And that means coming to a deeper conviction of how Christ the King has forgiven me. I have to remember that. This is often at the root of the inability to forgive. It's a lack of awareness that I'm a sinner unable to pay back Jesus for dying for me personally. So this is the existential condition of every Christian, really every human. We're the first debtor. And our baptism has been the full 10,000 talent debt of Adam. We couldn't do it ourselves. We can't do it. So let's go back to the parable in the first servant. As he leaves Christ the King's throne room free of debt, don't you think he should be walking on air? This is an unpayable debt that's been hanging over me and my family and everything I own for so many years. And with instant, it's gone. I'm a new man. And then suddenly he comes face to face with his own debtor. So this is where I come back to that kind of observation about a common fantasy I think we have about being king or a queen, you get that sort of fairy tale ruler. Because debtor 1 now has the same power and opportunity to exercise the royal virtue of mercy that he's just been shown by Christ the King. He just came from there. And now he has a chance to sit on the throne. And it's not just a fantasy. So all you genealogists out there, the good thing is we're all royalty. Our baptism is not only the pardon of the sin, that's the forgiveness part that Jesus did to debtor 1. It's also the coronation. So baptism is coronation. After the 9 o'clock Mass today, I baptized Colette Gianna. And one of the things I said, as I anointed her with chrism, is I anointed her is sharing Jesus' power as priest, prophet, and king. She's royalty. She's a princess. She's a queen because she's part of Christ the King in her baptism. And so we have a share in the power of the king. So the question is, what are we going to do with the royal power? If that's the question, what kind of king would I be? What kind of queen would you be? If you really had that crown, if you were sitting on the throne, if you had the robes, if you're sitting in Westminster Abbey or something, what kind of king would you be? We just saw that Charles III, right? A year ago. So it turns out one of Jesus' fundamental laws is what John Paul II called the law of the gift. We can't keep and grow what we don't give away. So if we have received mercy, if we don't give out the mercy, we become stuck, we become stagnant, the charity is bottled up and ends in us, and we become debtor 1, who throttles a person who owes him 3.5 months' wages. Because we don't let the mercy work. It turns out, from the genealogy box, that there's no actual noble titles in the Nagel past. Actually, what we found out was we're a bunch of German, Welsh, and Irish peasants all the way back. That's okay. Farmers. No, that's who we are. I'm okay with that. But If you've ever dreamed about wearing a crown, this is one beautiful thing about our faith. You have a chance to find out what kind of king or queen you'd be. Is there somebody that you need to forgive? Is there someone who's sinned against you? Do you have to come face to face with debtor two? Or actually, again, someone who has more of a debt against you than just 3.5 month wages? Will you be one of those evil monarchs from history and fairy tales who choke and oppress your subjects? Or will you be the compassionate and merciful ruler that you kind of think you should be and are? This shows whether you are or not. Are you going to share in Christ's majesty and throne and mercy and that royal power of forgiveness? Do you want to be like Christ the King? It's in your power through your baptism to forgive.